Hello, welcome to another Burgundy with Tweedy video. I'm in another unusual location, this time the Thames estuary in Kent. I'm out doing a Tweedy outdoors walk. Gonna have some lunch here on the beach. This is called Egypt Bay, this spot. I have, of course, brought along some wine with me. This is a producer called Claude Dugat. I have featured some wine from them before. It was a Gevrey Chambertin, which I remember being particularly excellent, although alas, the tasting notes for it were very cursory because I was mostly just out enjoying the sunset, I think, on Hampstead Heath. Didn't really stop to do any detailed tasting notes, but I recall it being very, very good. So I thought, oh, perhaps I'll buy some more Gevrey Chambertin from Claude Dugat. They're quite a well-regarded producer, though, and the prices are, they seem to be getting towards Domaine Fourier level prices. So I was struggling to find anything of a reasonable vintage that I think would be worth drinking from Claude Dugat for a Gevrey Chambertin below about £120, £130, which is, you know, sort of double what I'd ideally like to spend on a Gevrey. Well, I'd ideally like to spend £10 on a Gevrey Chambertin. That obviously isn't going to happen. So what I've done, which is a common tactic of mine, is to look at a lower level appellation from that producer, see what they have available. They do in fact make a Bourgogne Rouge, and I think from some of the reading around I've done about this is one of those producers who actually uses some grapes from a more specific village, or at least around the edges, and then calls it a Bourgogne Rouge. So I may have misremembered this because I haven't checked this again today, but I believe these are actually grapes sourced from vineyards in and around Gevrey Chambertin. So this is really the budget version of their Gevrey Chambertin. It still isn't cheap. For a Bourgogne Rouge, this is a pricey wine. It was 40 something pounds. I'll put the exact price on screen. It's from Lay & Wheeler. I bought two vintages from them, a 2019, which I have really high hopes for. I think that's likely to be excellent. 2021, which I think is probably a bit more of a gamble. For some reason, I didn't want to spoil myself too much while I was just sitting here on a bit of the Thames estuary with that 2019. So I've saved that for another occasion. It's my pocket sticking out. I'll perhaps have that on a different occasion, and this time just going to go for the 2021, which is not a vintage I've had a great time with so far. With that recent run of Confurant Gendre wines, it seemed to me the 2022s were better, and I had, it was an interesting comparison because I had three different appellations: a Bourgogne Rouge, a Nuit Saint-Georges, and a Vosne Romanée. Three of those from 2021, three of those from 2022, so I could compare, you know, some different terroir and all that. And I actually think the 2022s did significantly better. Now, perhaps the 2021 wines are just wines that are very slow to come into their own, and maybe these will start to be great, I don't know, a year or two from now, who knows. But normally I hope that a Bourgogne Rouge is sort of designed to be drank relatively young, but given that this producer charged rather a lot for it, or at least the secondary market, I don't know if this is these prices are fixed by the producer or perhaps just the secondary market. Because I was buying this from Lay & Wheeler, so I assume that means it was sold possibly even by a client of theirs. Somebody else has already bought this first and then sold it on through Lay & Wheeler. Anyway, probably far too much babble. I recall that Gevrey Chambertin from Claude Dugat was relatively pale, relatively light on the extraction, and I don't know if that's coming across on the video there, but I'm seeing a similar sort of colour there. Relatively pale, relatively light, within the norms of Burgundy. Correspondingly, it is one of those relatively light noses, initially at least. Sort of berry fruit, raspberries, perhaps even a touch of cranberry there. Normally cranberry is something I say when I'm not enjoying it. I don't want to write it off straight away, because that's a sort of slightly more severe kind of berry fruit. I want the berry fruit character to be, if it's there, to be sort of luscious and opulent, not a bit sort of severe. There is something slightly scratchy, woody there. Yeah, definitely something woody along with that, so perhaps cranberry is sort of fair. That's not a brilliant start, actually. Red berry fruit, possibly cranberry, possibly something slightly woody. Let's give that a bit of a swirl, see if it improves the situation. Yeah, I suppose that fruit's a bit fresher and brighter with a bit of air, but I'm pretty sure we're still in the territory of red berry fruit. If there is any cherry there, then it's extremely light, delicate sort of cherry. Okay, well, let's give it a sip. I would say that fares better on the palate than I expected from that nose. First of all, really a lot of acidity there, quite tart even. So that suggests this is a wine that's perhaps in it for the long haul, and 2021, now in 2025, probably too soon for this particular producer's Bourgogne Rouge. Really quite acidic. I do like high levels of acidity, but that was quite surprising. But I suppose along with that there is quite a lot of freshness of that fruit, which is nice. I'm getting less of that kind of slightly severe straying into cranberry and more of kind of slightly tart but really fresh raspberries, I think, predominantly. Maybe a little bit of strawberry in that. Quite juicy actually, but tart at the same time as juicy. Yeah, quite tart, quite juicy. Perhaps something slightly woody mixed in with that, but that's subtle here. Predominantly what I feel I have here is a glass of quite high quality but essentially sort of boozy raspberry juice. That's quite tart. Raspberry wine, some sort of fruit wine. Perhaps I'm being unfair. Again, that Gevrey Chambertin from Claude Dugat was exceptional, I thought. Perhaps I'd had that after a bit more aging and it was a different vintage and so many other variables there. This is okay, but I suspect I'm just drinking this far too young. I suspect the producer was intending this to be aged somewhat more. Doesn't quite have the majesty of that Gevrey Chambertin, certainly, because that had all these lovely floral notes and it was sort of light and delicate, but with kind of perfume and all sorts of other interesting things going on. This is light and delicate, but really just fresh, juicy fruit. I might come back to you if my thoughts develop on a subsequent glass. I can quite possibly see that being the case. With a bit of airing, this might start to, some of those floral notes or something might start to emerge. But yeah, initial sip, probably I've just opened this too soon, I think. Nice fruit, but not doing much else right now. Cheers.